Let's go live to Trudy McIntosh. She's on the campaign trail. She's with Scott Morrison at the moment and his team. You're in Brisbane today. What Scott Morrison had to say about this?
Well, Laura, he launched a full frontal assault on the Deputy Labor leader Mr Marles this morning after this front page in The Australian, which has resurfaced comments that Mr Marles made in a book published last year. The argument from the Deputy Labor leader is that these Pacific Island nations are free to have whatever relationships they like with China, and that also that Australia can't expect that we have this exclusive relationship with our nearest neighbours. This has all been triggered by this newly inked security deal between Beijing and the Solomon Islands. It's been something that the Australian government has been concerned about for some time, and we saw that finalised earlier in the week. This has launched a pretty nasty brawl on the campaign trail, the Labor side accusing the coalition of really failing to stop this from happening. They've called it the biggest foreign policy blunder we've seen since World War II. Scott Morrison argues that sort of rhetoric, in particular from Mr Marles, is hypocritical given his previous comments.
You only have to ask the would-be Labor Deputy Prime Minister, Mr Marles. He set it out in quite a tome where he actually advocated for the Chinese government to be doing exactly what they are doing. Labor's Deputy Leader advancing that 8 months ago or thereabouts, and then the hypocrisy of trying to criticise the Australian government. I mean, the Chinese government's intentions have been clear for many years. We've always taken that very seriously.
The language around this, though, has to be more nuanced. We heard Scott Morrison earlier in the week himself making the point that Australia can't be stomping around in the region and that we have to respect sovereign decisions of other countries. So both sides using similar language and saying we can't force our will on these sort of countries. Putting the politics to one side, though, Angus Taylor, the Energy Minister this morning, conceding potentially if China gets a stranglehold in the Solomons, this could be a real risk for Australia's fuel security.
If there's a war, if there's any kind of disruption, Pete, that means the ships. That means we can't get the fuel here, right? The rest of it.
Hang on, Pete. You're missing the rest of the numbers. There's another 37 days of petrol, and then there's refining oil in process.
Well, one of those worst possible circumstances is if China militarises the Solomon Islands. Would that not interrupt sea lines of communication and our fuel supply from the United States?
It could well do, Pete, and that's why we need to have our own supply of crude.
The latest plank of the coalition's Khaki campaign has been unveiled today. The government will commit $428 million to upgrading defence bases across the country, including one here where I am in Brisbane. That includes Amberley in Queensland, Pearce in Western Australia, Richmond and HMAS Albatross in New South Wales. The money is going to go towards upgrading airport runways, also fixing lighting as an example of what this will go towards, and the Prime Minister will promise that this will create 600 jobs, Laura.